Move it or we'll have it impounded. That's what Cheryl Whitmore, our HOA president, barked at me in front of my own garage. Her voice echoed down Sycamore Lane like she owned the pavement. I didn't flinch, just leaned against the fender of my '69 Lincoln Continental, arms crossed, calm as ever. You sure about that? 'Cause I rebuilt the transmission in this car. I know every bolt, every plate, and every line of that HOA agreement your office just violated. She blinked. I straightened up and smiled. And Cheryl, I own the easement under this driveway. You're standing on my land. My name's Julian Ortega, 36, born 2 towns over. I'm an auto restoration specialist. Classic American machines only. This car, my father and I built it together in the garage he left me when he passed. So when Cheryl slapped a citation on its windshield for aesthetic disruption, she wasn't just insulting a car, she was desecrating my father's memory. And that's not something I take lightly. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever had to deal with an HOA from hell, yeah, buckle up, it's about to get real. They say a man's driveway is his castle. In Silver Pines, it's a minefield, the kind where smiling neighbors sip wine at sunset while filing anonymous complaints about your non-conforming chrome. It started simple. A notice pinned to my mailbox 2 days after I moved in. Your vehicle must be stored in a garage to comply with visual harmony standards per bylaw 8.2c. Visual harmony, that's what they called it. I laughed the first time I read it. I thought it was a joke. I didn't laugh the second time when the fine came. $250.00 due immediately. The thing is, this wasn't just about some petty ordinance. That Lincoln, it's not just a car, it's my dad's legacy. I remember sitting in the passenger seat when I was 5, him in his oil-stained flannel shirt, adjusting the idle while Johnny Cash played through the speakers. I remember the way he'd rest his hand on the gear shift like it was part of him. That's the last place he ever drove before the cancer made him too weak to hold a wrench. He left me the car and the garage he built with his own hands. Said one day it'd keep me grounded when the world tried to push me around. Guess that day came faster than I thought. I tried the civil route first, took the letter and walked into the HOA office. An over-renovated shed with a fake granite countertop and 3 live, laugh, love signs, too many. Linda Cho, the secretary, looked up like I'd ruined her day by existing. If you're here about a violation, you'll need to file a dispute form. They're over there. No, I'm here about a mistake, I said. That fine. My car is legally parked, licensed, insured, and it's my property. You don't get to tell me how it looks. Belinda blinked once, twice. It's not about legality. It's about community standards. That's when I knew logic wouldn't work here. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power game. They didn't care what the law said, they cared about control. So I filed the form, took photos, sent emails, and when Cheryl ignored them all, I started documenting everything, every letter, every visit, every sneer she shot at my driveway like I'd parked a tank on her lawn. I kept to myself, but Cheryl didn't. She walked by daily with her little dog and her oversized sunglasses, pausing just long enough to glare at the Continental, like she thought it would get up and drive away out of shame. It didn't. Neither did I. By the second week, she started weaponizing the neighborhood. One neighbor, then another, leaving polite yet pointed notes. Maybe your car would be safer inside, and we all have to make sacrifices for beauty. Beauty? That car is art. And something told me Cheryl didn't care about beauty at all. She cared about dominance, order, obedience. I wasn't going to give her any. The last straw came Friday night. I found a second citation, same violation, only this time with a bold new warning. Continued defiance may result in enforcement escalation, including law enforcement assistance. They were threatening to call the police over a parked car. But they underestimated one thing. I don't scare easy. Not when it comes to defending what my father left behind. Not when it comes to principle. So I did what he would have done. I got to work. Because if Cheryl Whitmore wanted a fight, she just picked the wrong damn driveway. She didn't wait long to strike again. Saturday morning, just as I was wiping down the hood of the Lincoln, a golf cart with a laminated HOA placard pulled into my driveway without invitation. Cheryl stepped out in heels that clacked like a warning shot. She had a clipboard in one hand and her phone recording in the other. pure HOA theater. You've now received 2 official notices, Mr. Ortega. If you don't remove the vehicle within 48 hours, we'll be forced to escalate to compliance enforcement under Article 6. She said it like she was reading from a script. Maybe she was. I didn't look up from the chrome bumper. And I told you already, it's my legal right to park here. You don't get to rewrite easement law because you don't like my taillights. That irked her. Her smile twitched. We're simply maintaining standards. If everyone did what they wanted, this wouldn't be Silver Pines anymore. I turned, towel still in hand. You mean it wouldn't be your version of Silver Pines? She didn't respond, just tapped her clipboard with her pen, scribbled something, and walked away. No yelling, no drama, just quiet, surgical pettiness, the kind that stings worse than shouting. I knew I was being baited. Cheryl wanted me to snap, to give her a reason to justify whatever came next, but I'd grown up watching my dad navigate small-town politics, council meetings, land disputes. He always said, "Power doesn't yell, Julian, it files paperwork." So that's what I did. I opened up the original HOA handbook, yes, the one they send in 12-point font that no one actually reads, and started highlighting. Bylaw 8.2c was vague on purpose. It referenced visual cohesion, but gave no measurable standard, no photographs, no vote logs, nothing that could hold up under scrutiny. What it did mention, buried 2 paragraphs down, was that any enforcement required approval from at least 2 board members and a follow-up notice delivered in person. I'd received neither. I drafted an email that night, calm, factual, loaded with time-stamped photos. Subject line, RE, enforcement action against property 423 Sycamore Lane, procedural challenge. Did I expect a response? Not really, but I wanted a trail. The next day, a manila envelope appeared on my porch. No knock, no call, just dropped and gone. Inside was a new letter, final notice before further action. No signature, no timestamp. But this one had a new clause scribbled in red ink at the bottom. Repeat violations may result in legal involvement. They weren't bluffing anymore. Later that evening, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. Not to cool off, but to observe, see how others lived. The Joneses had a rusted-out SUV under a car cover, clearly violating the visible deterioration rule. The Jennings garage door was broken, wide open, and stacked with cardboard and tools. Yet no citations, no letters taped to their windows. So why me? That's when I spotted her, Linda Cho, Cheryl's secretary, sipping wine on her front porch while watching me from behind her sunglasses. I waved politely. She didn't wave back. This wasn't about rules. It was about control. On Monday, I went to the post office and sent a certified letter to the HOA office. Inside, a printed copy of my appeal, my annotated bylaw analysis, and a demand for written clarification. At 4:17 p.m., I got an automated email. Thank you for contacting the Silver Pines HOA. Your message has been received. 2 hours later, Cheryl walked by my property again, this time with another woman I didn't recognize. Younger, sharp suit, clipboard of her own. They stopped at the edge of my driveway, pointed at the car, whispered something, and kept moving. I recorded the whole thing from the Ring camera. If they were bringing in legal counsel or some kind of compliance officer, I needed backup. That night, I called Sophia, my younger sister. Works in real estate, knows contracts, and the kinds of lawyers who don't advertise on bus benches. "You sure you want to go up against them, Jules?" she asked. "This isn't just petty, this is war by legal footnote." I looked out the window, the Lincoln gleaming under the porch light like a sentinel. "Yeah, I'm sure." She sighed. "All right, I'll send you the name of someone, but be smart. They're counting on you to slip." I didn't plan to. I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking of Dad, how he'd hum when he worked, how he refused to sell the garage when things got tight, said it was the only thing no one could take from him. And now someone was trying to take it from me, one line at a time. But here's the thing about people like Cheryl. They mistake silence for submission. And they never see it coming when the quiet ones fight back. By Tuesday morning, the air in Silver Pines felt tighter, like the whole neighborhood had paused to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I spent the early hours in the garage, working with the door open on purpose, hood up, socket wrench in hand. The scent of oil and old leather clung to the air like memory. Dad's shop apron still hung on the same hook by the tool chest, untouched. I never moved it. Halfway through replacing a busted vacuum hose, I heard slow footsteps on the gravel. I turned to find Brian Keene, my dad's old friend, standing just outside the door, with a coffee cup in his hand and hesitation written all over his face. He didn't say anything right away, just gave me a polite nod, the kind old men give when they've thought too long about something and regret it already. "You know," he muttered, finally stepping closer, "your father used to yell at me for over-tightening spark plugs." I smirked, wiping my hands on a rag. "Yeah, sounds about right." He chuckled, but it died quick. His eyes dropped to the car, then to the sidewalk, then back to me. "I saw the tow truck last week." "I figured you did." He shifted his weight. The hand holding the coffee trembled a little. "You've stirred up something nasty, Julian. Cheryl's not just playing queen, she's been rewriting things without a vote for a while now." I froze. Not all the way, but something about the way he said it, low and nervous, caught me off guard. "Come again?" I asked. He shook his head, immediately retreating. "I shouldn't have said that. Just be careful, all right?" That was it. He turned and walked off, spilling a little coffee as he went. That night, I pulled out a yellowing photo of Brian and my dad from the 90s. Grease-smeared faces, beers in hand, leaning against the same Lincoln I now fought to protect. Brian wasn't just some neighbor. He used to be family, which made his silence all the more frustrating. I replayed his words in my head, rewriting things without a vote. He knew something, maybe a lot more than he let on, but he wasn't ready to say it outright. I needed leverage, or trust. Maybe both. The next morning, I started digging. Not metaphorically. I went into the crawl space behind the garage where Dad used to store old HOA records. He'd been on the original Silver Pines board, back when it was run by people who actually cared about the place. Dust floated in the sunlight as I opened a cracked Rubbermaid bin labeled HOA 199220004. Inside, meeting notes, typed memos, handwritten voting sheets. No one else in the neighborhood had these. Near the bottom was a folded map of the community layout. Driveways, lots, and a red-penned section labeled Private Easement, Lot 423. That was my driveway. I traced the faded ink with my finger, heartbeat picking up. Legal proof. Dad kept everything. Later that evening, I walked the folder across the street to Brian's porch. He was watering his rose bushes, a ritual he'd never skipped in 20 years. "I brought something," I said, holding up the papers. He hesitated, then waved me up. We sat in silence for a moment, both staring at a bush that hadn't bloomed right in 2 seasons. "This map proves my driveway's private property. That HOA rule doesn't apply. They knew it. Dad recorded it." Brian's face twitched. He looked at the folder, but didn't reach for it. "I don't want to get dragged in," he said quietly. "I'm too old for HOA politics." "You were already dragged in when they started rewriting the rules behind closed doors." He flinched at that. I leaned forward. "Look, I'm not asking you to go public, but if you know something, anything, I need it. Cheryl's not just trying to find me. She's trying to bury Dad's legacy under red tape." His jaw worked silently for a second. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking again. "Check meeting minutes, March 14th, 2 years ago," he whispered. "It's not listed." But something changed that night. I blinked. "Brian, what happened that night?" He stood up abruptly. "Nothing. I said too much already." He walked inside without another word, leaving me alone with the roses. But it was enough. Back home, I dug through the digital HOA archives. Everything was neatly indexed, except for March 14th. The file was there, but when I opened it, it was blank, just a header and a footer. No agenda, no votes, no record of who attended. And suddenly I understood what Brian was afraid of. Whatever happened that night was scrubbed clean. Ever had someone try to erase your family's legacy with a clipboard and a fake smile? Drop your city in the comments, especially if you've had to dig through the past just to protect what's yours. The next twist? It's coming fast. The file wasn't empty by accident. It was clean. Too clean. A template header, blank agenda, and a digital signature timestamped at 11:42 p.m., far later than any normal HOA meeting ever ran. It looked like someone had opened the file just to click save and move on. Problem was, I knew what kind of meeting had to take place that late at night, the kind where no one wanted to be seen. I printed the file anyway, put it next to the map from Dad's old bin, stared at both long enough that my coffee went cold and the sun moved across the floor. If they'd changed something without documenting it, there had to be a paper trail, somewhere. That night, I took a slow walk past the clubhouse. Lights off, door locked, but there was a drop box mounted to the wall, labeled Archives Request, Board Use Only. I memorized the lock, make, and model just in case. Across the street, porch lights flickered on. Cheryl's house, second-story window, her silhouette behind the curtains. Watching, always watching. Next morning, I was under the Lincoln, tightening a sway bar bracket, when Sophia's number flashed across my phone. "Got your lawyer," she said before I could say hello. Retired now, but used to specialize in HOA litigation. Name's Bruce Matheson. Bit of a curmudgeon. You'll love him. I jotted the number down in grease-smudged handwriting. Tell him it's about a buried vote, falsified minutes, and a driveway they're trying to erase. She paused. You sure you want to keep pressing this? I glanced up at the open garage, the faded bench Dad sat on every Sunday, the empty apron still hanging. I didn't hesitate. I'm already in it. Bruce answered on the third ring. Yeah, he said, like he'd just been woken up or interrupted mid-argument. This Julian? Nepalisk. Matheson. My name's Julian Ortega. I was referred by... Yeah, I know, Sophia. Realtor with too much attitude. Go ahead. I laid it out for him. The citations, the missing meeting minutes, the easement map, Brian's cryptic warning. He didn't say much for a while, just scribbled. I could hear the pen tapping on something glass. Finally he spoke. That sounds like they tried to pass a shadow amendment, probably a vote held without quorum, a classic maneuver. They fudge the attendance, forget the minutes, and pray nobody asks questions. What can I do? You said you've got the old documents? Good. Now you need corroboration, witnesses, archived records, original filings, preferably the paper kind. They can alter PDFs all day, they can't rewrite ink. I've got the original HOA box. My dad saved everything. Bruce actually chuckled. Smart man. Probably knew one day they'd get greedy. He gave me a checklist. Old voting rosters, board attendance sheets, community-wide mailers, anything predating Cheryl's presidency. And one more thing, he added. Watch for anyone too quiet. People close to power tend to stay close. Until it's burning. I didn't sleep much that night either. The next morning I saw him again, Brian, watering the same patch of grass that hadn't grown in months. I crossed the street without thinking. You said March 14th. You were there, weren't you? He didn't answer. Brian, were you at that meeting? He stared at the ground, hose running over his shoe. His lips moved, barely audible. She changed something. There wasn't a vote. You sure? His hand trembled. I saw her erase the notes. Said she'd handle it later. But Julian, I've got a mortgage, a sick wife. You think they won't find a way to punish me too? I nodded slowly. I'm not asking you to testify, just help me find the right paper. Brian finally looked me in the eye. There's a metal cabinet in the clubhouse basement. Keys probably still in the fire alarm box. That's where they kept originals, unless she moved them. I didn't say thank you. I just gave him a look that said, I'll handle the rest. I spent the afternoon prepping. Camera in my pocket, gloves, flashlight, and a copy of Dad's easement map folded into my back pocket like a badge. It was time to stop playing defense. And if Cheryl thought she could win by scrubbing records and hiding truth in locked drawers, she was about to find out exactly who she'd underestimated. The clubhouse was closed, of course it was. Chain on the front doors, security sticker peeling off the window, a posted sign said closed for maintenance, board approval required for access. Probably taped up that morning, if I had to guess. Didn't matter. I circled around the side, past the overgrown hedge near the utility meter. Dad used to say every locked door in this neighborhood had a rusted back way in. He wasn't wrong. The fire alarm box was right where Brian said, faded red, covered in cobwebs and HOA gilt. I popped it open and there it was. Small brass key on a loop labeled storage, looked like it hadn't been touched in years. My palms were already sweating. I stepped inside through the rear maintenance door, one of those heavy metal ones with a weak latch and bad memory. No cameras, no noise. The hallway smelled like dust and old paint. A flickering motion light clicked on overhead as I passed the water heater room. I moved slow, careful. Every sound felt louder down there. Floor creaks, the groan of the pipes, my own breath. The basement was colder than I expected. And darker. I found the metal cabinet wedged between old chairs and a broken folding table. Scratched up, dented, but locked. The key worked. Inside, rows of hanging folders. Handwritten tabs, years and years of HOA history, more than what they'd ever digitized. And right in the middle, one folder labeled March 2023 Mended Vote Logs. I pulled it, opened it. Not redacted, not digital, just ink, real handwriting. I ran my finger down the page. 7 names listed, 6 crossed out in pencil. Next to Cheryl's, a star. No checkboxes, no signatures, no timestamps, nothing legal about it. I flipped the page. Stapled to the back was a note. Amendment 7B passed via emergency clause. Subject, easement realignment, lot 423. Remove grandfather exemption. Lot 423. My house. The very thing my dad protected. And they'd buried it here, hoping no one would ever dig through the dust. I took photos of everything, every page, every margin note, the handwriting, the list, the date. And at the bottom, something else, a letter, unsent, crumpled but stuffed in the back. Dated March 16. To whom it may concern, I can no longer remain silent. What occurred during the last board meeting violates everything I signed up for. There was no vote. The changes were decided behind closed doors, and when I objected, I was told it would be handled quietly. I fear retaliation. I'm considering resigning. And Brian, no question. I stood there, folder still in hand, staring at the concrete floor. The boiler groaned somewhere behind me like it was waking up after a long nap. That letter? It was enough to burn everything down. Quietly, legally, and with the truth. But I wasn't ready to go public yet. I needed one more thing, confirmation. I slipped out the way I came in, heart still hammering, phone packed with evidence, keys tucked back where they belonged. When I got home, I scanned every image into a folder marked Legacy, password protected, backed up to 2 drives, uploaded to the cloud. I wasn't losing this. Not to Cheryl, not to anyone. Later that evening, I walked down to Brian's house. He was in his garage this time, hands deep in a bag of potting soil, trying to breathe normal like nothing had changed. I didn't say much, just held up my phone and turned the screen toward him. He stared at the image of his own unsigned letter. I didn't speak. I didn't look away. He set the soil bag down and nodded once. "You didn't get this from me," he said. "You're just confirming what I already found." He nodded again, this time slower. "Be careful, Julian." "I'm done being careful." They tried to bury a vote, erase a man, strip a driveway from a son who never asked for anything but the right to protect his family's ground. And all they left behind was a paper trail. The folder sat untouched on the dining table for hours. I'd been staring at it from across the room, pacing the hardwood floor with my arms crossed, not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I did. And part of me knew it was going to get louder from here. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The air had that mid-evening stillness, not quite night, not quite dusk, somewhere in between, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. I walked around the house, past the roses that never bloomed, and down the slope behind the garage to the tree line. That bench was still there. The old cedar seat Dad built the year after Mom died. I hadn't sat on it in maybe a decade. Funny thing, he always said this bench will hold more truth than any courtroom. I wiped off a layer of pollen and sat down slow, folder in hand. The same spot where he taught me how to fix a carburetor, where he read letters from the HOA with a sarcastic grin, where we buried our dog under the oak with the twisted limb. This was why I wasn't backing down. This dirt, this bench, this memory. It wasn't just a driveway. It was a line drawn by a man who worked his whole life to protect it. And now someone like Cheryl thought she could erase it with ink and silence. I flipped the folder open and started taking inventory. Photos, voting logs, the confession, and something else. At the bottom of the stack, a blueprint copy. Stamped, filed with County Clerk, 1997, easement registration. Not scanned, not digital, the original carbon copy press. It had Dad's signature. And a witness line signed by someone named Victor Greaves. Never heard of him, but he mattered now. Back inside, I called Bruce. "You sitting down?" I asked. "I'm a lawyer in his 60s, that's basically my default state." I laughed, but barely. I found it, all of it, including a signed, filed copy from '97. He whistled low. "You've got gold. Now you need to make it useful." "What do you mean?" "You don't just show the truth, you position it, build pressure, create a situation where they either correct course or get exposed publicly. Start small, let them commit another violation, rope in the lawyer Cheryl's been parading around, let her double down. And then we burn the curtain down." I hung up and opened my laptop. If Victor Greaves signed that blueprint, he might be a notary, or a county surveyor, or someone who'd remember what Cheryl wanted forgotten. It took about an hour and a dozen calls to figure it out. Victor was still alive, retired, lived 2 towns over in a little farmhouse off the highway. I left him a voicemail. I didn't think he'd respond, but 5 minutes later he called back. "Julian Ortega, you said, the Lincoln guy's kid?" I blinked. "Yes, sir. You remember my dad?" "Sure do. Tough guy. We used to talk shop when he came into the office. I signed that easement myself. Why?" I exhaled, slow. "Because they're trying to undo it. Illegally." Silence. He cleared his throat. "I kept a box of old projects in my barn. If that doc was processed through me, I've got the original scan sheet and stamp log. When can you come by?" "Tomorrow." Before I ended the call, he said something I didn't expect. "You know, your dad brought you with him once. You were little, sat on my desk swinging your legs and asking what a landline was. He told me, 'This kid'll inherit everything that matters. I'm just keeping it warm.'" I didn't say anything right away. I'd just looked at that same easement copy on my table, worn at the edges but still holding up. Tomorrow, I'd get the last missing piece. But tonight, I just sat in the quiet, on the bench beneath the tree where memory still waited. Because Cheryl didn't just come after my car. She came after my name. Ever had to fight for something everyone else forgot, but you never could? Drop your city below if you've ever stood your ground for family, legacy, or something they tried to take, just because it was easier. Things are about to shift, and not in the way they expect. Victor's farmhouse sat just past a faded sign that read Greaves & Sons, Surveying, Est, 1972. The letters had chipped and peeled from sun and weather, but the name still stood proud. The front porch creaked as I stepped on it, and the screen door opened before I could knock. Victor Greaves looked exactly like a man who'd outlived 2 floods, a zoning war, and 3 mayors, wiry frame, thick glasses, and a hand that shook slightly. But when he gripped mine, it was like iron. "Coffee?" he asked. "Only if it comes with a document." He smirked. "You're your father's kid, all right, come on in." Inside smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper. Every wall lined with filing cabinets, drawers, maps, decades of land carved and claimed. He led me to the back room, opened a metal cabinet, and pulled out a binder marked Ortega, Lot 423, easement, registered copy. "This one's the original," he said, handing me a plastic sleeve with a stamped form inside. "Filed under 1997 code. That stamp there," he pointed to a red circle with faint initials. "County seal. Back then, HOA overrides couldn't touch registered access without 100% consent from surrounding owners." My head tilted. And if they never got that consent? That it's still active? I took a slow breath. "Would you be willing to confirm this in writing?" Victor leaned back, rubbed his chin. "Julian, I'm retired. I don't do courtrooms anymore. But..." He reached into the drawer and pulled out a notepad. "I'll give you a declaration. Dated, signed. That'll shake 'em up. Maybe even wake that board from its little fantasy." He paused, halfway through scribbling, and gave me a look. "You said they're trying to erase the easement entirely?" Yeah, buried the amendment, faked a vote, targeted me specifically. Victor snorted. These HOA types think bylaws are weapons. What they forget is paper can cut both ways. I left with the document clutched tight in my glove compartment and one name ringing in my head. Consent from surrounding owners. That meant Cheryl hadn't just bypassed me, she had to fake other approvals too, which meant one thing. There was more to dig. I knew just where to start. Back in the neighborhood, I walked 2 houses over and knocked on Brian's door again. His wife answered, gentle smile but tired eyes. He's out back, she said, no questions asked. Brian sat in a plastic chair near the garden hose, like always, but when he saw me, he didn't flinch. I showed him the copy of Victor's note. You were right, no vote, no consent, no legality, this seals it. He read it in silence, then passed it back. She's gonna lose it. That's the plan. He hesitated. I need to tell you something else. I waited. That night, the meeting, Cheryl didn't just fudge the notes. She cornered Ed, the treasurer, told him to shut his mouth or lose his spot. He kept quiet, but he's been drinking more lately. Doesn't sit right with him. You think he'll talk? Brian shrugged. Maybe if he sees you're serious, and if he's not the first to step forward. I saw the decision etch across his face like a man pulling a splinter out. Slow. He stood. I'll write my own letter. You'll have 2 witnesses. You sure? He nodded. I'm done hiding behind hedges. That night, I started putting the puzzle together. Victor's easement declaration. Brian's first-hand account. The original vote logs. The forged agenda. And Dad's map, still pinned to my wall under a pushpin shaped like a tiny silver truck. Now I needed one last thing, a way to corner Cheryl without giving her room to slip out. I called Bruce. You've got the upper hand, he said. But now you need the setup. What kind? The kind where she walks herself into a lie. I've got a garage camera still synced to my server. Use it, bait her, let her think she's still winning, get her talking. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Time to spring the trap. 2 days later, Cheryl made her move. A bright red citation envelope was pinned to my mailbox with duct tape because class was never her strong suit. Violation, non-compliance with parking ordinance, unauthorized vehicle display. Bolded, underlined, stamped like it meant something. Funny, there hadn't been an HOA meeting in weeks. No updated ordinance, no memo to residents. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd set the bait, and she took it like it was sugar-dusted bait on a steel trap. Earlier that week, I'd rerouted the garage's security feed back through my local server. A microphone was mounted under the porch awning, disguised as a rusted wind chime Dad built in '98. Sounded like junk metal. Recorded everything. I left the garage door cracked, left the classic car visible, left the copy of Victor's easement folded on the workbench in plain view like I'd gotten sloppy. I even left the side gate unlatched, because I knew Cheryl couldn't resist one last walk onto my property. And at 2:12 p.m., she arrived. Not alone, either. She brought Carl, the HOA's so-called legal consultant, and Ed, the jittery treasurer Brian had warned me about. Ed looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Carl wore too much cologne and not enough spine. The camera caught her clearly, heels clicking on the driveway, sunglasses pushed up into her platinum hair like a villain fresh from a Botox conference. "Look at this circus," she hissed, glancing into the garage. "Easement or not, we're removing that car. If he wants a showpiece, he can buy a museum." Ed mumbled something about the vote logs. She spun on him. "We handled the logs, Ed. The board's final say is what matters, and I am the board." Carl stepped in. "Technically, Cheryl, we should file another notice. It would look better if—" "Oh, please, Julian's bluffing. If he had something real, he'd have used it already." There it was. The arrogance, the corner cutting, the full belief she'd already won. I let them stew in their own entitlement for another 10 minutes before I remotely triggered the porch chime sound cue. A little ding, just enough to make Cheryl flinch. They left quickly, heels and nerves scattered behind them. I waited until nightfall. Then I went into my office, downloaded the footage, clipped the audio, and packaged it with the easement files, Brian's letter, Victor's notarized confirmation, and a transcript of Cheryl's little confession. Next step, fire the first shot publicly. The next morning, I attended my first HOA meeting in 6 years. I didn't speak. Not yet. Just sat in the back corner of the community room, behind a family with a toddler drawing on a napkin. Cheryl hadn't seen me walk in. Carl looked like he'd seen a ghost. Ed? He wouldn't stop checking the time. Once the standard agenda items passed, trash collection, landscaping, some nonsense about fence paint, Cheryl stood at the front and cleared her throat. We have one more violation to discuss. I stood up, loudly. All heads turned. Actually, I said, voice steady, I have something to share. She blinked, then recovered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. This isn't an open forum. It's not a forum, it's a correction. I pulled the USB from my pocket and walked to the front like I belonged there. Carl half rose like he was going to object, but sat right back down when he saw I wasn't bluffing. I plugged it in, projected the screen. Hit play. Cheryl's voice echoed through the room. We handled the logs, Ed. The board's final say is what matters, and I am the board. Mouths opened. No one spoke. I clicked forward. Victor's scanned declaration. Brian's letter. The stamped original easement. This is what legacy looks like, I said. What law looks like, what truth looks like, and you tried to bury it under arrogance and duct tape. Cheryl tried to speak, but no one was listening anymore. The silence in that room didn't crack. It detonated. Cheryl stood frozen, one hand still halfway lifted, like she could rewind the moment if she just stayed still long enough. But the damage was already done. Parents leaned forward in their seats. A guy in a polo shirt whispered to his wife. Someone in the back actually laughed. Short, shocked, but real. Carl stared at the projector screen like it might catch fire. Ed looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. I unplugged the USB, slipped it into my pocket, and walked back to my seat without a word. It wasn't a mic drop. It was a mirror drop. And Cheryl was the one staring into it. I don't believe this is admissible, she stammered, voice cracking like old paint. Carl cleared his throat and stood. Actually, I think we need to recess. I'd advise the board to take this under legal review. Carl, Cheryl, you lied. His voice dropped to a whisper, but it still carried. And you brought me into it. He turned to the room, avoiding my eyes. The board is suspending further enforcement actions until this is sorted. That wasn't a win yet, but it was the tide pulling back before a wave. I stood again. This isn't just about a car or a vote. It's about what happens when one person thinks they're the law. I looked straight at Cheryl. You made it personal. You thought legacy could be buried under bylaws. She opened her mouth again, but this time it wasn't her voice we heard. It was Ed's. It was there, he said quietly. She told me to sign minutes that never happened. I didn't want to, but she said I'd lose my position, that I'd be sued personally if I didn't go along. The room gasped like a single lung. Cheryl's face drained of color. You traitor? Don't, Ed whispered. Don't make me your scapegoat. He looked up at me. I'll sign an affidavit. I kept my copy of the meeting notes. The real ones. They're in my garage. That was it. The last domino. I didn't need to say a word. The crowd turned on its own. Questions, outrage, demand for vote rechecks. A woman with a stroller shouted, "We've been fined for years for dumb stuff and you forged minutes?" Cheryl grabbed her purse like she was about to bolt, but Carl stepped in front of her. I think you should leave, officially. She shoved past him, heels clacking like gunshots. She didn't look back. I stepped outside after the meeting and just stood in the sun. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. Bruce called 30 minutes later. You did it. It's not over yet. No, he said, but it's unwinding fast. Ed's affidavit is gold. With Victor's document and your footage, it's enough for formal complaint. Can we file civil penalties? If you want to, but honestly, you've already won what matters. I hung up and walked back toward the garage. The driveway was quiet again. No angry citations, no threats, just that old cedar bench in the backyard, catching the last bit of light. I sat there again, hand resting on the folded blueprint in my pocket. The one Dad signed. The one that outlived 100 threats. A few neighbors walked by and nodded. One guy even gave me a thumbs up. It wasn't victory with fireworks, it was quieter, deeper, like something wrong had finally been pulled out by the root. Ever been the one they underestimate until you pull the whole truth into daylight? Drop your city below if you've ever exposed a lie they swore no one would find. This story's not done, the reckoning's just heating up. The HOA office smelled like stale coffee and paper toner, the kind of place where bad ideas got notarized. I wasn't even supposed to be in here technically, but with Cheryl suspended and Carl barely holding the wheel, the place had cracked open like a dropped egg. Bruce met me outside the door. "She'd lawyer up yet?" "She tried," I said, holding up a file folder, but her lawyer didn't know I had a full chain timestamp on the footage, audio metadata, sync calendar entries, the whole nine. He smiled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." I opened the folder and handed him a copy of Ed's affidavit. His hands were steady, but his eyes skimmed it like he was scanning for landmines. "This is everything," I said. "It's not just about Cheryl, it's how many people let it happen." Bruce looked at me. "You want the whole board out?" "No," I said, "not all of them. Because even in a room full of sheep, some were just cornered, not corrupted. Take Linda Rojas, for example. Secretary for 2 years, soft-spoken, always wrote notes but rarely spoke up. I'd barely noticed her in meetings. But that changed after the vote. Linda came up to me in the parking lot after the meeting with a folded paper in her hand. "Don't tell anyone I gave you this," she said, voice trembling. "Cheryl changed the minutes. See here, the original file. I kept a backup. Couldn't bring myself to throw it out." She walked away before I could thank her. People were starting to feel the shift. Not just in the boardroom, but on the sidewalks too. Neighbors started waving. Someone dropped off fresh lemons from their tree, unprompted. A kid rode his bike past my place and yelled, "You're the guy from the meeting, right? My mom says you're a beast." I laughed, but deep down I felt it. Cheryl's reign had fractured, and fractures spread. I headed into the archive room, small, dusty, full of records dating back to the 90s. I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here to find something deeper, proof that this HOA's pattern of behavior had been rotten long before they targeted me. It didn't take long. 3 boxes in, I found it, a stack of letters from 2011, handwritten complaints about driveway repaint, citations, photo evidence denied, neighbors being fined for minor issues, while board members were exempt. Most were signed by a woman named Clara Whitson? I'd never heard the name, but one letter stood out. Clara had written directly to the county inspector attaching photos of her cracked driveway, photos she'd dated and marked. The HOA had cited her anyway, claiming the cracks weren't visible at the time of inspection. Except, she'd included a time-stamped image from the inspector's own visit. And what's worse, Cheryl was on the board back then too. The playbook hadn't changed, just the targets. I snapped photos of every page, backed them up in triplicate, then called Bruce again. "I just found your pattern of abuse, goes back years." He whistled low. "County court's gonna love this. We can file for punitive damages?" If she weaponized her position against residents knowingly, yeah, especially if there's financial harm. That was the nail. Because now it wasn't just about me. It was about everyone they'd steamrolled. By the time I left the HOA office, the hallway felt warmer, lighter. Like maybe the building itself was tired of housing people like Cheryl. Lyndon passed me again on the stairs. "People are scared," she whispered, "but not of you, not anymore." That hit harder than I expected, because I wasn't just restoring a driveway. I was restoring the idea that someone, anyone, could stand up and the ground beneath them wouldn't collapse. The board's vote to hold a special election was scheduled in 3 days. And for once, I wasn't just attending. I was about to decide who ran the place next. The community center had never been this full. People stood shoulder to shoulder, some with their arms crossed, others gripping folded newsletters or HOA notices. Even the back wall was lined with folks who never came to these things. Young couples, veterans, retirees, who usually kept their heads down. Tonight, they came with eyes open. And all of them were staring at me. I stood near the front not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I'd earned it. Behind me was Bruce, calm as ever, with a satchel full of notarized statements and copies of those old files. Linda sat beside him, fidgeting with a pen cap, her face pale but determined. And Cheryl? Cheryl slouched in the third row, arms crossed like she still ran the place. But her power had thinned. You could feel it. The whispers around her weren't deference anymore. They were doubt. Carl walked up to the podium and cleared his throat. This meeting has been called to vote on a special election and to address the misconduct brought to light over the last 2 weeks. No one clapped. No one needed to. Carl looked at me. Julian, you've requested to speak first. I nodded and stepped up, placing a thick envelope beside the mic. I won't waste your time, I said, scanning the room. You already know what happened. Forged minutes, targeted fines, property violations used like weapons. Murmurs spread, heads nodded. This isn't just about me or a car or an old easement. This is about what kind of place this is going to be moving forward, and whether fear keeps running it. I pulled out a photo, one of Clara Whitson's letters, and held it up. This was written in 2011. Cheryl ignored it, buried it, same tricks, same bullying, different target. I looked at Cheryl then. She didn't blink. She made me think I was alone, and I know she did the same to others. More murmurs. A man near the back stood. Yeah, she cited me for a deck I got approved, said the paperwork never existed, I had to rebuild it. Another voice. She fined my mom while she was in the hospital, said non-compliance doesn't wait on illness. Then Ed stood up, shaky but firm. She threatened to sue me if I didn't falsify the vote record. I stayed quiet because I was scared. I'm not scared anymore. It was like someone lit a match. The room erupted, not into shouting, but into something stronger. Resolve. Carl raised his hand. Quiet, please. We're proceeding with a motion to vote on board reassignment. New leadership. We've received 3 nominations for president, and one of them is Julian Ellis. Cheryl's voice cut through. You can't be serious. Carl didn't even look at her. You abused your position. You forged board documents. If this were court, you'd be facing criminal charges. Her chair scraped back hard. I built this neighborhood. No, I said. You tried to control it. There's a difference. She looked around for support. Found none. Even the loyalists she used to pull the strings on sat stone-faced. The vote took less than 10 minutes. I didn't win by a landslide. I won by a storm. By the time they counted hands, my name carried 2/3 of the room, enough to elect me interim president until the formal election date next quarter. Enough to restore what she'd broken. As Carl passed me the gavel, he muttered under his breath, "Careful what you wish for." I smiled. I didn't wish for it, I earned it. The room applauded, not the polite kind, but the kind that rumbles from people who've waited too long to see someone finally stand up. And for once, I didn't feel like I was standing alone. I didn't touch the gavel again. After the vote, I placed it gently back on the table, thanked Carl for running the meeting, and walked out without ceremony. The win wasn't the kind you parade. It was the kind that settles in your bones, quiet and heavy, like a long breath after holding it too long. The next morning, I did the first thing that felt real. I walked to the backyard and sat on Dad's old bench. The one we'd sanded together when I was 16. The one that still had his initials carved underneath, next to mine. I ran my fingers over the grain and let it all sink in. Cheryl's out, officially. Her resignation letter, typed in cold legalese, came in before noon. She cited community hostility and emotional duress. I didn't dance, but I did smile. Linda dropped by an hour later, still clutching her planner like a shield. They want you to stay on, she said. Run the board, officially, in the spring. I don't want the job, I told her, but I want the system fixed. She nodded. That's exactly why you should take it. Later, Bruce and I went through the paperwork one last time, cleaning up citations, waiving false fines, even digging into older claims residents had been too afraid to fight. Feels good, doesn't it? He said. It doesn't feel like revenge, I said. It feels like repair. A week passed. The neighborhood softened. You could feel it in little things. The Taylor twins painted chalk art in their driveway without anyone breathing down their necks. The Morales family rebuilt their garden beds, no violation threats taped to their front door. And Ed? He came by quietly, holding a 6-pack of root beer and looking about 10 pounds lighter. I should have spoken up sooner, he said, setting the drinks down. You did, I replied, when it mattered. He smiled, nodded once, and walked back home. No long speeches, just peace. I found something else that week. While sorting through Dad's old shed, I came across a sealed envelope behind a drawer. My name on the front, written in the same blocky letters I'd seen on the blueprint. Inside was a photo, me and him, arms slung around each other, leaning against the original easement marker. On the back, in faded pen, some things worth building have to be protected, even when they outlast us. That one hit me hard, because this whole time I thought I was fighting to win, but I wasn't. I was just protecting what he built. The easement, the garage, the freedom to breathe in your own backyard. It was never just about a car. It was about dignity, about being able to live without fear on land your family poured sweat into, about refusing to let someone like Cheryl write your story for you. I placed that photo inside the bench, tucked behind the panel we'd once replaced. Let it stay there. Legacy doesn't need loud endings, just quiet ones that last. Some things worth building have to be protected, even when they outlast us. If you've ever had to stand up to an HOA, a power trip, or someone who thought they owned your peace, drop your story below, or just let me know where you're watching from. This one was personal, and if you've been through it too, I see you.